Hello and welcome, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Robin Ray Green, and I am blessed and grateful to be here with you tonight and talking about one of the subjects that I am super passionate about, especially when it comes to helping children heal from acute and chronic illness, and that is sugar. And tonight I'm specifically going to be talking about the real reasons why kids crave sugar and refined carbohydrates. As I know as a parent, it can be so frustrating when your kid has an addiction to these foods. They will beg, they will plead, and sometimes wear us down until we finally give in and let them eat that sugary treat or those crackers we don't want them to eat. And we're going to talk about that tonight. And I'm going to reveal a few things that you may not be aware of and some you may be. So I just want to welcome everyone. Hi, Bonnie. I see you there. Welcome. And if anybody else is listening or watching live, just shoot me a little wave or say hello in the chat or write a comment. So I love hearing from you guys. And even if you're watching this recording, please do the same thing because I will be checking the comments later on and answering your questions. So sugar, we know they shouldn't have a lot of it. We know it's going to make their symptoms worse. We know it's going to make our kids more prone to getting sick. It's going to lengthen recovery time. We know they might be more moody or irritable or cranky or have trouble falling asleep when they're eating a lot of sugar. But unfortunately, a lot of kids are really addicted to these foods, and the thought of taking sugar away from their diet is like, it's frightening because what are they going to eat, right? Oh, hi, Patricia, and hi, Gargi. Oh, it's so good to see you guys here. All right. So what do you do, though? The sugar is everywhere. And I don't know about you guys, but like when my kids were little, it would just drive me nuts when people I didn't even know would offer my kids sugar. Like you go to the bank and then there's like a little bowl full of Dum-Dum lollipops sitting right there. And I hated having to be the bad guy constantly saying no. And, so it's everywhere. And processed food and refined carbohydrates are everywhere. So what am I talking about? I'm not just talking about cookies and cake and that kind of stuff. I'm also talking about white foods like, saltine crackers and white pasta and white bread or even whole wheat bread. Like if you don't look carefully at the ingredients in your bread, it's very possible that your whole wheat bread, the number one ingredient is often white flour. So these foods are everywhere. And when your kids are addicted to them and they're craving them and they're begging for them all the time, it can be really hard to crack down on them. So is this sounding familiar at all, guys? I mean, even if your own kids aren't like this, maybe you know of children, your friends' kids who are going through this are struggling. Moms are just struggling to figure out how to get their kids to eat something else. So I think until we examine the real reasons why our kids are craving these foods, it's hard to change it. So there's a couple underlying reasons kids are craving sugar and refined carbohydrates that very few people know about. And the first one I think is more well known. And the reality is sugar and refined carbohydrates, they basically get broken down in your system and go into sugar, into glucose in your bloodstream very quickly. So they're very similar to sugar. They light up the pleasure centers of the brain. And I'll post this picture later, but there's a picture of an fMRI scan. One is a scan of a brain from somebody who did cocaine, and the other is a scan of somebody who ate, the same person eating sugar. And I kid you not, the brain on sugar, the pleasure centers are more lit up on that brain than cocaine. So, I mean, I'm not going to go out and say, it's the same as giving your kids cocaine, but when it comes to that pleasurable experience that children have when they eat these foods, it is no doubt when you see those brain scans that is what is occurring. And so once, you eat something pleasurable, you want more of it. And it's not like, sugar's not a drug it's not like it should be classified as a drug maybe, but it's not. And so it's readily available. Like if you go into your pantry, you probably have things in there that you wouldn't want your kids to eat. We all do, right? So it feels good to eat them. Your child wants them. They crave more of them. But why is that happening? Why does it light up the brain that way? Why does eating sugar light up the brain that way? And really, we can thank our biology for that. When we were hunter-gatherer peoples and food might have been more feast and famine. I mean, really back in our caveman days, we were lucky to get enough calories just to survive. And so when we tasted something sweet, it was an indication of a calorie-dense food, and the sweet sensation, the sweet taste is what made us want to eat a lot of it right in that moment. And some of the researchers out there that are doing research on the gut microbiome, they have visited the hunter-gatherer peoples that are still left on this planet, and if they like find a honeycomb or they find a beehive, I mean, these guys can literally eat like a quart of honey in one sitting. And this, you know, eating that much sugar, that it doesn't make them sick. It may actually put on a few pounds for them. That could be the difference between, you know, living and dying, you know, surviving the winter or not. So it's really like our biological imperative when we taste something sweet to want to fill up on that sweet thing, because in, you know, earlier times, this was a matter of survival. And like I said earlier, now we have such abundant food, like in at least half the world does. I mean, not everywhere in the world are people as lucky as we are to have access to food all the time. But then because these carbs are so convenient and so available, it's so easy to reach for, it's such an easy snack to have, then it becomes like it becomes just sort of, you just want it more and more. And that brings me to the second reason, and I think the one that very few people know about, and that is that we all have a gut microbiome. And what that means is your microbiota is, your gut microbiota is all the bacteria and fungi and protozoa, all those microbes that live in our gut that make up this little ecosystem. And our microbiota co-evolved with us. So we sort of evolved with these bacteria that do very important things in our body. They help us digest fiber. They help us make things like vitamin K. They help us absorb minerals and nutrients. They help tune our immune system so that it's not overreactive. And so when a child, or anyone actually, when we eat sugar or we eat refined carbs, it actually disrupts the microbiota. And this disruption to the microbiota ends up basically over a couple of days of eating all these sugar and all this carbs, it changes the microbiota significantly. And we start feeding like things like candida. I think you've all maybe heard of candida. It's a type of fungus that can, they're yeast that can live in our gut. And, we all have a little bit of them, but if we're eating a lot of sugar and refined carbohydrates, then we will have a lot more of them, and they can grow out of control. And then, what we see, some of the side effects of that might be things like, a vaginal yeast infection or itching around the anus, or some other signs of candida is like body odor that's really strong, that, it like really bad foot odor or really bad, underarm odor that doesn't seem like, it's one thing when you're out there sweating and working hard and you have a strong odor, but the odor from an overgrowth of candida is a little bit different. But the idea here is within just a couple of days of eating a lot of sugar and refined carbohydrates, we change the gut microbiota. And as we're feeding those bad bacteria or yeast, they grow and they release these metabolites from eating all that sugar. And those metabolites can actually cross the blood-brain barrier, and that influences our brain. And that in turn creates the cravings for more of those foods. So I imagine it's sort of like you're sitting there and like there's like the little yeasties are like, ooh, like, you want that cookie, eat that cookie, we need that cookie, that cookie would be so good. It's like almost beyond our control, because it's not only does our brain like the sugar, but our gut brain likes the sugar too. And the thing is, we have to stop. We just as quickly as we can change our gut microbiota from eating a lot of sugar, we can change it back. So that's the good news. It's not like, oh, I'm screwed. I ate too much sugar and now my gut is changed forever. It's totally reversible. So the things that we need to do are, of course, eliminate the sugar and refined carbohydrates. And I know that is easier said than done. And I know for many kids that are picky, you might think, what the heck am I going to feed this picky kid? Because all he eats is macaroni and cheese and, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And yes, it might be tough for a couple of days, but I promise you, your child is not going to starve in 48 hours if they don't get to eat, unlimited goldfish crackers and Cheerios. They will be fine. And what actually happens is, because we start starving those bad bacteria and they begin to die off, their palate opens up, and they're much more willing to try foods that before they wouldn't have tried. They might be more willing to eat something like applesauce, which they might have rejected before. And it kind of resets their palate a little bit. And I was talking to my kids tonight because they go to it's tonight, Tuesday nights. This is why I'm doing Facebook Live, because my kids are off at our youth group at our church. And I was asking them, because I know that sometimes the leaders will take them over. There's a 7-Eleven right next door to the church. And I was asking them, like, oh, so do you guys, eat sugar there? What do you guys get? And they were kind of like, I said, no, I promise you're not in trouble if you've eaten sugar. I know that you guys eat, treats there sometimes. And, so they were like, well, sometimes I get a Slurpee. And I was like, really? What do you think of the Slurpee? And my son Noah's like, well, I drink about like a quarter of it and then I give it away because it's just too sweet. And it's like, it's just too sweet. And that just warmed my heart, because I was like, oh, thank goodness. Because the truth is, when your kids are not eating sweets every night and they're not getting all those things, their palate actually changes. And like, when you're not eating a lot of sugar, an apple will taste really sweet. An orange will taste really sweet. And I don't know if this is resonating, if you are noticing that difference when you've removed carbs, remove sugar, and you notice how your child's palate changes and they're more receptive to foods, let me know in the comments. But so you got to think in terms of 48 hours. Like, if you're gonna detox your kid from sugar, you need to really commit 100% for 48 hours. And you need to think about, like, what can you feed them? Like, what can you feed them to fill them up that doesn't involve pasta or crackers or bread? What do they like? You might need to do a little experimenting ahead of time. You just got to play with it. And then when you're ready, you pull the trigger, and everybody has to be on board. It can't just be you, because moms, we are the bad guys already often enough. So dad has to be on board. Grandma has to be on board. Anybody who takes care of your kids has to be on board, and they have to know what you're doing, because otherwise one little bit of sugar can sabotage your whole efforts to get them less addicted to it. And I see Gargi is agreeing with me. Yes, absolutely. So I promise you guys, if you were to just detox your kids from sugar for 48 hours, you would see a huge difference in what they were willing to eat. And the reality is, if you don't want your kids eating refined carbs and sugar, you shouldn't have it in your pantry. That's just bottom line. Sugar will slow down your child's healing time. If they have any issues, if they have asthma, allergies, eczema, frequent illness, digestive problems, they're going to slow down your progress if they're eating sugar, because it disrupts the gut microbiota. So that is the bottom line. So it has to do with the pleasure centers of the brain and our biology that is wired us here. And it has to do with how these refined carbohydrates and sugar influence our gut microbiota. So that is what I have to say on that tonight. Are there any questions before I call it a day? I'll give you guys a few seconds to write them in the comments, but I will be back again in a couple days, and there's more topics I want to address regarding food that I think are just so important. So many little things that moms can do and dads can do, and everybody has to be on the same team and on board. But man, I'm telling you, when you get your child's diet dialed in and you're doing all the right things, it's amazing how these conditions can just turn around. It's really, really pretty awesome. All right. Well, I am not seeing any questions come through, but if you're watching the recording and you have a question, please let me know in the comments. I truly do want to know how this is landing, and what your thoughts are. If you have any questions about cutting your kids off from sugar and refined carbs, I am here to support you. And so is this entire group of awesome parents. We just got up, I think last time I checked, we had something like 934 parents in the group. Yay, parents! So I want to welcome all the new parents that joined, and I will see you guys in a couple of days. All right, bye everyone.